History rarely changes in an instant. Empires don't usually fall on battlefields, and freedom is almost never stolen overnight. Sometimes control fades quietly, one signature at a time. December 1913. While America was preparing for Christmas, a few men met in Washington to finalize a piece of legislation that would reshape the nation. To most citizens, it was just another act of Congress. To them, it was the completion of a plan, almost a decade in the making. The newspapers called it the Federal Reserve Act. The name sounded noble, even patriotic. But hidden in those pages was the moment when power over America's money, its economy, and ultimately its future shifted from the people to private hands. That was the day America lost control, and almost no one noticed. It wasn't a coup carried out by force, but a transaction sealed by law. No bombs, no blood, no armies, only pens, paper, and persuasion. A quiet revolution sold as reform. If you've ever wondered why debt keeps rising, why every economic solution seems to create more dependence, and why crises never hurt the same people twice, stay until the end. Because to understand the system we live in, we have to return to the day it was born. At the turn of the 20th century, the United States stood on the edge of a new era. Factories were booming, railroads connected coast to coast, fortunes were made overnight. But the financial system behind that prosperity was fragile. Bank runs were common. Every few decades, panic struck. 1873, 1893, 1907. Each time, ordinary Americans lost everything. And each time, the solution came not from the people but from the bankers. The panic of 1907 was the breaking point. It began with rumors of insolvency in a few New York trusts. Within days, panic spread nationwide. Banks collapsed, credit froze, businesses failed. The country stood on the brink of ruin. In that chaos, one man emerged as savior, J.P. Morgan. From his private library, Morgan summoned the heads of major banks and forced them to coordinate rescue loans. He was hailed as a hero, the man who saved America. But others saw something else. If one banker could stabilize the entire financial system, what did that say about who really held the power? 3 years later, that question would be answered, not in public hearings, but in secrecy. In November 1910, Senator Nelson Aldrich, head of the National Monetary Commission and father-in-law to John D. Rockefeller Jr., boarded a private train leaving New York. With him were some of the most powerful bankers in the world: Paul Warburg of Kuhn, Loeb & Co., Henry Davison of J.P. Morgan, Frank Vanderlip of National City Bank, and Benjamin Strong of Bankers Trust. They used fake names, told the press they were on a duck hunting trip, and disappeared to a secluded resort off the coast of Georgia, Jekyll Island. There, hidden from the public, they drafted a plan to create a new central bank, one that would appear to serve the nation, but in reality serve their own interests. Warburg later admitted the secrecy was necessary. If it were made public that we were writing a banking bill, it would never pass. What they designed was brilliant. A system that looked federal but wasn't, and appeared to hold reserves it did not. The Federal Reserve would control the nation's money supply. It would issue currency backed not by gold or silver, but by debt, promises to pay later. And while it would present itself as a public institution, its ownership would remain in private hands, the same banks it was supposed to regulate. In essence, America's money would be borrowed into existence. Every dollar created would come with interest attached. And because only the Fed could issue that money, the debt could never be fully repaid. It was the perfect loop. Debt created money, money created more debt. And control of that loop meant control of everything built upon it. 3 years after Jekyll Island, in the closing days of 1913, the plan became law. Congress had already left Washington for the holidays. Most Americans were focused on gifts and family. In that quiet gap, the Federal Reserve Act passed both houses with little debate. President Woodrow Wilson signed it on December 23rd. Few understood what had just happened, even fewer cared. But the small circle that had drafted the plan now held the keys to America's financial future. From that day forward, control over the money supply, the oxygen of the economy, rested not with elected officials, but with unelected bankers. They could expand credit, contract it, or move it across borders. They could create prosperity or provoke collapse. And because the Fed was independent of Congress, no vote could reverse it. Paul Warburg, one of its architects, became a founding member of its board. The very man who designed the machine was now at its controls. Aldrich's family gained direct influence through Rockefeller interests. J.P. Morgan's institutions became primary dealers of the new currency. Power had changed hands, quietly, permanently. Within a year, Europe was at war. And for the first time, America financed global conflict not with gold or taxation, but with credit created by the Federal Reserve. War became business, and business was good. When the war ended, debt remained, profits grew, and the pattern was set. From that moment, every major event, every boom, every bust would run through the same mechanism. Money created from nothing, leveraged into power. The 1920s brought expansion. The 1930s brought collapse. The same machine that fueled the boom withdrew credit and caused the depression. Millions lost everything. The banks emerged stronger. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement made the US dollar the world's reserve currency, another extension of the 1913 design. And in 1971, when Nixon ended the gold standard, debt finally became the only collateral left. The system was complete. Let's pause for a second. Think of the elegance behind it. If you lend money you don't have, charge interest on it, and get the government to guarantee repayment through taxation, you've built a perpetual motion machine, one that converts labor into profit without ever running out of fuel. That's the true genius of the Federal Reserve. It doesn't need to conspire, it simply operates as designed. And as long as the public believes it's there to protect them, it never has to hide. Over the decades, critics have warned of this concentration of power. Congressman Louis McFadden called the Fed one of the most corrupt institutions ever created. President Kennedy hinted at reform before his death, but the system endured because dependence had replaced choice. Every time the economy trembled, the Fed rescued it. In 2008, trillions were printed to bail out banks that had gambled with the world's economy. In 2020, emergency liquidity flowed again. Each crisis reinforced the same structure: private risk, public cost. And still, the headlines praised the saviors. So, what really happened on that winter day in 1913 wasn't the creation of stability. It was the nationalization of debt and the privatization of control. That quiet handover from democracy to finance. Woodrow Wilson himself later confessed, "I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit." He was right, because once a nation's money is controlled privately, everything else follows. Industry, media, policy, even war, all orbit the same sun. Today, few citizens can name the individuals who sit on the Federal Reserve's board, yet their decisions determine mortgage rates, stock values, and the cost of every dollar in your wallet. They are unelected, largely unknown, and accountable only to the same institutions that own shares in the system. That's not conspiracy. That's design. The control established in 1913 never ended. It simply evolved, from paper to digital, from gold certificates to credit scores. Every advancement brought convenience and another layer of dependency. The promise was stability. The price was sovereignty. 110 years later, the results speak for themselves. National debt beyond comprehension, inflation eating away at wages, generations born into systems they cannot escape. But the architecture remains invisible. Most people don't question it because it works just well enough to keep the illusion alive. You can buy, borrow, and spend, but you'll never truly own. History will remember December 23, 1913 as a quiet day. No revolution, no protest, no headlines screaming, "Power seized." Just another day in Washington. Yet in that silence, America changed forever. Its government still stood, its flag still waved, but the authority behind its currency had shifted. That's how control vanishes, not in fire but in paperwork. So the next time you hear about another trillion in spending, another bailout, another temporary measure, remember this: Every system traces back to a beginning, and ours began the moment money became debt. That was the hidden day America lost control. If you've made it this far, you already understand it. Power doesn't vanish. It migrates, and those who know where it went hold the map to the future. Follow the hidden ledger to uncover more of the quiet moments that changed history, the signatures, the meetings, and the decisions that still shape your life today. Because history isn't just written by the winners, it's financed by them.